capable of capturing images of breathtaking beauty of the natural world, the human landscape, and the intersection of the two.
They're a game changer.
Drones are just that, a game changer, an innovative invention, and a powerful video production tool.
Yeah, the great thing about a drone is that it's like putting a miniature helicopter in the palm of your hand.
Shots that were once impossible, impractical, or just too expensive are now easy to achieve.
I was fortunate enough to be there when this program launched, but I've just been so impressed with the creative heights we've climbed to since.
But drones are also an area of emerging and evolving regulation. Rules on how, where, when to fly are constantly changing.
It's called armoring.
Our guest today has been at the forefront of this exciting new technology. Devin Feely is an anchor, reporter, and a licensed FAA remote pilot. He is currently the station's senior-most drone pilot. Since helping to launch KPIX's SKYDRONE 5 program in 2017, he's twice been awarded a regional Emmy for Best Photography and once for Best Writing.
Hi, thanks for joining us today on What Works. I'm Steve Shlisky. I'm the past president of the National Academy of Television Arts and Science, San Francisco, Northern California chapter, and I'm currently serving as the Activities and Programs Chair. I'm super excited today to be joined by Devin Feely from KPIX 5 to talk about drones and how to use them as a creative storytelling tool. The video from the open to the show was amazing, and I want to jump right in. So, Devin?
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for having me. This is kind of a seminar that we have talked about kind of having for a long time, and it's such an integral part of my reporting and storytelling, and I'm really, really excited to be here today.
So, Devin, how long have you been flying drones?
So I want to make an important distinction. I've been flying for probably about 6.5 years in total. Part of that time, I was just flying recreationally, just for fun, in essence. And for about 5.5 years, I've been doing it as a commercial pilot for the station.
Well, that's an interesting distinction. What's the difference between flying for fun and flying for the station as a licensed pilot?
Okay. So it kind of makes sense before we kind of get to the fun stuff, before we get to the dessert, that we sort of deal with the vegetables, so to speak. It's really kind of important to know that if you're flying for any type of business, what the federal government, what the FAA considers to be a commercial use, that could be a television station, that could be a production company, that could be a movie set, that could be a real estate company that uses aerial photography to maybe photograph or video some of their listings. That could even be a well-monetized YouTube channel. You have to become licensed, a licensed drone pilot. You're getting what's known as a Part 107 license. And this is a part of the federal code that applies to the registration, to airman certification, and to the operation of civil small unmanned aircraft systems within the United States. That's how the federal government describes drones. So about 6.5 years in total, 5.5 years after being licensed by the station to fly professionally.
So is getting this license hard?
I think the way that I would answer that is that it is not easy. It is also far from impossible. So our station, kind of in flux. We have probably about a half dozen people at our station on staff that are licensed at any given time. It does involve some level of study. And basically, it is very similar in many regards to the basic foundational information and training that you would get if you were to become an actual pilot of an actual plane. And basically, the overarching kind of goal of this training and the certification is for you to understand safety as it applies to the operation of drones, and additionally airspace, the national airspace, because the overriding concern is keeping these wonderful tools that are a ton of fun, but potentially dangerous if you're flying in places or ways that are impermissible, and you want to keep them away from commercial airplanes and aircrafts and airports. And so understanding the rules that govern that is really important. There's just a couple of them that we're going to go over today very quickly, and then we're going to get to some of the examples of the videos that I've created. The ceiling for drones, because people always ask, how high can they go? Well, under most circumstances, you're not supposed to fly them higher than 400 feet. That's because commercial aviation begins at 500 feet and above, and that allows you to keep them away from them. And the other one is that there is an area of what they call controlled airspace that's around every airport in the United States. Typically, it's about a 5-mile radius. So think of a point on a map that is that airport. 5 miles around it is controlled airspace. You need special permission in order to fly in those areas.
Well, that's really a lot of good information there. But let's get to the fun stuff. Walk us through your creative process. Some of the amazing drone videos that you're going to share with us today.
Yeah, so I want to start in a way that kind of goes to the fundamentals of what goes into the creation of a great image. And this really sort of applies both to photography and videography, which are sort of, kind of cousins of each other in some ways. And for anyone that's really interested in photography or videography and gets deep into it, either professionally or even just as an avid hobbyist, ultimately, photography and videography is about the quality and the direction of light and how you use that light to create really compelling images. And it's right there in the name. And Randy, if you can, our director today, if you can pull that up just one more time, the actual root of the word photography, when you look at its Greek origins, it means to draw with light. And there is it may sound abstract, but there really is no greater sort of influence on the types of images that you're going to make than really sort of harnessing and using the available light. And also additionally, how you compose your shots. And because a drone moves, that's not something that's static. It's where it starts and also where it goes once you decide to fly it: forward, backward, right, left, up, and down.
Well, that's enough of the professor stuff. Can you start giving us some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and roll some video. I want to show you. Go ahead and unmute myself. This video is from a story that I did a few weeks ago. It's in essence, it was a story early in the spring, unseasonably warm weather, concerns also about what that might mean for the upcoming summer. Let's go ahead and just watch this video. The background audio for the second piece is a little bit louder, so I won't talk over it, but once this is finished, I'll go ahead and contrast the two sets of videos. Yeah, so that first video, it was shot. The purpose of the story was kind of a story about the unseasonably warm weather that we were having. You can tell just from watching that video, that is a hot, sunny day. The video was shot in the late afternoon. Even if you don't know all of those things, your eyes and your experience in the world kind of tells you about that. It tells you that about that video when you watch it. The second piece of video that we showed just a second ago was from a story that I did about climate change, about sea level rise, the concerns and the impact to coastal communities. So the first set of videos, actually both of them were shot in Santa Cruz. The first one was of the Walton Lighthouse. The second one was not far from the first, on a different day, obviously. It was shot at sunset. And obviously you have a different sort of color to the video. You've got oranges and reds and yellows from the sunset. And that, I think, really, though the juxtaposition of those two images really gives you a sense of how working creatively with lighting conditions with the drone can create video that has very different feel. One of them feels like summer. The other one, I think, really does kind of convey the message of the, kind of existential threat potentially that global warming can pose to coastal communities and really to all of us. But really, the principal difference is not location. It was time of day and it was the quality of light.
Well, not even you can control the weather. How do you harness these conditions and make them work to your advantage?
Yeah. So I would say that if you have the luxury of time, one of the things that you can do is you can select days and times of day that are going to give you the best possible um, outcomes for your video. Now, you don't always have control about that. And so the next piece of video that I want to show you is of the San Francisco skyline. It's two sets of videos of the Salesforce Tower, one of them that's shot on a bright, sunny, cloudless day, and the other one that's shot under a little bit less than ideal kind of weather conditions. Why don't we go ahead and roll that? Yeah, so this one obviously kind of shot in the afternoon. You got a beautiful day in San Francisco. The colors of this, video really sort of pop. You've got the Salesforce Tower centered in it. Now, this one was shot on a different day. Overcast, as it often is in the city. I think kind of arguably the second video, at least in terms of its composition, a little more interesting. But the weather conditions kind of flatten the colors. You can kind of tell there's a difference. Here the colors are vibrant. In that second piece of video, they're a little bit flatter. They're not nearly as saturated. I warmed it up a little bit in editing, but it is what it is. And sometimes, if you're flying on a specific day under deadline, you don't have that luxury, but a lot of times you do. And, a lot of the video that I'm going to show you today is from special projects. It wasn't day turns. And so I'm conscious of what the weather conditions are going to be like, of what the lighting conditions are going to be like. You don't actually have to guess about this. There's a wonderful website that I was introduced to a few years ago by one of our drone photographers. It's called photoephemeris.com. You can put in any location on the planet, the day and the hour, and it will tell you, is it sunrise, sunset? Is it that golden hour a little bit after the sunrise, a little bit before the sunset when kind of lighting conditions are ideal? And if it's really sort of important to you to make sure that maybe, say, a specific side, maybe the front facade of a building is lit, you can actually kind of scroll through the day and see the direction of the light and when it's going to really sort of be, kind of optimal. Let's go and roll. I've got a video here of the ferry building in San Francisco that will kind of illustrate the importance of the direction of light. This is the ferry building, city skyline behind it, shot in the morning. So the morning sun is coming in, from the east, and we've got all of, the city and the skyline behind it, lit up really nicely. And in just a second, we're going to see essentially the same building from the reverse angle, Bay Bridge in the background. This is shot in the afternoon, so the light has gone 180 degrees, and you can see, the building up front, the Bay Bridge in the back. And kind of the importance of this, so lighting has quality. It has a direction to it specifically. If you were to take those same videos and basically reverse the time of day, you wouldn't really get the same results. You might not even really get anything that would be usable, because the side of the building that you're trying to showcase would be, it would be backlit, it would be dark. And so when you're really trying to create the most compelling images that you can, the quality of the light matters, the direction of the light matters, and you can kind of harness all of these things to the best effect possible. I think we've got one last piece of video that's from a story that I did.
It's the Bay Area's only ghost town. In the dying light, what little is left of Drawbridge comes to life, painted in a palette of amber and bronze. Its weathered walls and rusted roofs now a canvas for trespassing graffiti artists eager to declare, I was there once, and that they share with the spirits of this place. And Drawbridge, Devin Feely, KPIX 5.
Yeah, so what I really like about that's the opening and the closing shot for a story that I did a special project on, an abandoned ghost town that's at the southernmost tip of the San Francisco Bay. And it really sort of brings all of these principles, sort of into focus, because that's a story. The opening shot was shot in the morning so that I knew that I would get nice lighting coming in from that side. The closing shot was in the afternoon when the sun had shifted to shine on that one particular building. And, you've got, especially for that closing shot, what you have is it begins with at least kind of a medium tight shot that slowly reverses itself and pulls up. It's a simple motion, just kind of pulling the drone back and having it ascend at the same time. But I think it's really sort of effective in sort of taking the focus from that one building, that one lone sort of desolate building that's left out there, and just kind of showing the emptiness of the landscape as the marsh kind of reclaims that building. And I think it's just, it brings all of that into it. It's the quality of the light that's almost at sunset. It's the direction of it. And it's the intentionality of how it's framed and the motion of the drone. I think, all of those things in combination are what make those images, in my estimation, really effective.
So I want to take this moment here. If you have any questions for Devin, please write them into the comment section. Those on YouTube and those on Facebook, there's a comment section, and you can comment or ask questions, and we'll get those to Devin as we go. And I guess obvious questions, and you must get this all the time. How high can they go, and how far can they go?
Yeah, I get that question all the time. Now, I want to mention one other thing, Steve. The station was nice enough to give me a couple of these hats. So if anybody asks a question and then, says they want one of the hats, can maybe give their email information, we can get these to them after this workshop is over. Yeah, I get asked all the time, how high can that go? How far can that go? Those are the questions that I get probably more than any other. And the way that I answer that question is, I said, it can go a lot higher than I'm actually allowed to go by the government. So like I mentioned before, the ceiling for a drone, and this is the drone that I fly here, is 400 feet under most circumstances, because basically you're trying to keep it out of the way of airplanes, helicopters, and things that might be in the airspace. It can go much higher. Some of the video that I showed you a little while ago of the skyline in San Francisco and the Salesforce. The drone was higher than that, and that's because if you're flying around a building or a tower or something like that, you can fly an additional 400 feet above the tallest building. Now, in answer to the question of how far it can go, the answer is it can go a lot further than I would ever fly it, because it can go probably about 2 miles. But when I am flying the drone, I'm also simultaneously looking at a live camera feed from the camera that I can see, like in the iPad that I use to fly the drone that's connected to the controller. It can go 2 miles or more, but I'm going to lose that video signal well before it gets to 2 miles. And so whenever I begin to lose that video signal, that
I think that we have momentarily lost Devin. We're going to try and get him back quickly here. So let's, Randy, go ahead and roll part 2-1 while we're waiting for Devin to come back.
They would not say exactly why or how he started the fire, but from here the flames would radiate out, touching the lives of countless people who simply had the misfortune of being nearby. In the Santa Cruz Mountains, Devin Feely, KPIX 5. There is hope here, forged in fire, ready to rebuild. And that's something worth toasting, something always to be thankful for.
So Devin, we lost you momentarily there. We just went to the next video.
Yeah, I saw that. So this segment we're calling it we're borrowing a barbecue term. We're calling it low and slow. So there is an easy temptation with a drone. I think most people that buy a drone, whether it's for a business or just for their fun, first thing that they do once they set it up is just kind of pop it up in the air and see how high they can send it, and maybe swirl it around and make some videos. I think it's actually interesting. I mean, that might be the most effective way to use your drone for any given application, to basically kind of use it like a station would use its helicopter. But it's pretty versatile, and there's some other ways that you can use it that I think are equally, if not more effective. And so sometimes flying it much closer to the ground can be really interesting. It can give you, kind of a unique perspective by flying it in that way. The two examples that you just showed, the first one was from a story about an arson fire in the Santa Cruz Mountains and the aftermath of that. That fire started on a property that had dozens and dozens and dozens of these older model cars that were stored there. I'm not even really sure exactly why, but most of them just kind of burnt up in the fire itself. And so I was able to hike up onto this property. And, in that video, I would say if the drone is any more than 5 feet off the ground, that's probably about as high as it was, because it's just skimming right over the tops of those cars. And because of just kind of the way that it's set up, plus the gimbal, which stabilizes the camera, it's really buttery smooth. And I think it looks super cool, just kind of going over, the tops of those burnt out cars and just kind of revealing the devastation from that fire. The second story was shot at a winery in the North Bay. It was a winery that was destroyed, or the tasting room of the winery was destroyed in a recent fire. One of the things that survived that fire was this really cool sculpture that they had of a wild boar. I think they had came up with some kind of colorful nickname for it. They called it Lord Snort. And
so we got some material in there that we could salvage to put into a sculpture.
Yeah, so that's another video of that same sculpture from the story about basically how this winery was dealing with the aftermath of the fire and kind of struggling to recover and to keep open. And so you can see all of just the destruction from that fire that hadn't been cleaned out yet. I want to say something about that second video. I mean, it kind of circles back to our first topic. So because this was a special project, I was, kind of picking and choosing the days that I went up there to shoot. I had looked at both the weather conditions and also that website that I mentioned before, Photo Ephemeris, to try and figure out the most optimal times to be out there to shoot. But, Mother Nature and the weather doesn't always cooperate with you. So for part of the day, it was bright and sunny. In the afternoon, and I needed the sun from the afternoon to shift to the backside of that winery. By the time it did that, the clouds had kind of rolled in. And so you can kind of see, I think it's a super cool shot, just kind of reversing through all of the destruction there, showing the sculpture in the background. But I would have liked the weather conditions and the lighting conditions to be a little bit different, a little bit better. I actually tried to go up a second day. And this just speaks to me. I'm kind of obsessive and a perfectionist. So I went up a second day to try and recreate that shot, but you can't always get it exactly right. And ultimately in the end, I was like, well, no, this one's good. It just is what it is. It was shot on an overcast day, and there's just nothing to be done with that. And so that's the one that I used. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it is very tempting to send a drone as high as you possibly can and fly it from 300 or 400 feet up. But I challenge people to also think about other ways and think about sometimes flying closer to the ground and the perspective that can get you. I want to show you one more piece of video on this segment, low and slow. We'll watch it, I'll tell you something about it, and then we'll watch it again. It's of the San Jose City Hall and a sculpture that they have down there. So these rings at night light up. Once again, this is shot probably about 5, a little bit after 5 in the afternoon. Lighting conditions in urban settings are often kind of tricky because it's not just where is the light, where's the sun going to be? It's also going to be, you know, is it blocked by another building? So specifically, I kind of chose this time to get good lighting conditions. Now, I'm not actually flying the drone. If you see in the bottom right corner, you can see the shadow of my friend and fellow drone pilot, Kit Doe. He's holding the drone in his hands, and he's using essentially an electric skateboard, a one wheel, and he's kind of threading the needle of that art sculpture there with the drone, basically like this, using the gimbal. I'm on headsets and we're talking to each other. You know, I'm telling him, okay, adjust yourself a little bit right, you know, angle the drone just a hair this way. And so sometimes, because, you know, I actually did try it a couple times and they were pretty good, but you oftentimes can't fly in those kind of close quarters with like complete precision in the same way that he can on this electric skateboard. But I mean, I include that in the slow or the low and slow segment just to kind of underscore they're always trying to sort of push the limits of what we're doing and come up with different and unique applications for the use of the drone for video.
Well, that video from San Jose really is amazing. And I feel like, are you cheating a little bit? I mean, you know, it's not really
a little bit. I mean, I would say a little bit. I mean, there's a little bit of trickery. That's why I showed it to you twice. And then and then I said, okay, look in the corner down there. You can see, I mean, you can very clearly see his silhouette and you can see the drone in his hand if you know what you're looking for. You know, I mean,
well, it does demonstrate the sort of outside the box creative style. How does that help you learn to use this drone creatively? You know, what's really next? What can you do with it?
Well, I think what's important to me is that really, you know, to sort of in some ways demystify what these drones are. They're tools. They're video production tools. We're going to, in a later segment, look at some of the outside of the box ways in which we can use it. But it is ultimately a camera. It is a camera with a gimbal that stabilizes it and then an aerial platform, right, that flies it. And so I use it in conjunction with my regular camera that the station gives me. I use it in conjunction with GoPros and gimbals and other things. And in this segment that's going to come up, not the one that's right next, but the one after that, all of that kind of comes together. You know, I mean, so ultimately it is about storytelling and video production and what is the most effective and creative and sometimes unexpected ways that you can use it.
I mean, really, they are just tools, right? And it's how you use those tools. You know, not everybody with a hammer can build a house. You need to have some aesthetic quality to what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the next segment. And this will kind of highlight some of the tools that are built into the drone itself. Some of the things that they have programmed it to do that allow you to create videos with pretty amazing precision and sophistication that you're like, wow, that's got to be a great pilot. Well, perhaps what that person is doing is sort of harnessing some of the technology that's already built into the drone and the flight software. Let's go ahead and roll that next video. All right. Hopefully you can still hear me. Yeah, so that was a video that I created for a story that I did about a lighthouse in the East Bay, and the two lighthouse keepers that get to live there and also essentially operate it as an Airbnb. And that boat is how you get from the mainland out to this lighthouse, which is on a small island in the bay. Now, I love that video, and I would love to take full and absolute credit for creating that. I mean, I think it looks like it could be something that's an intro to, you know, some kind of a movie or something in terms of just how well the drone follows and captures, you know, that boat as it speeds, you know, in the harbor there. But full disclosure, as much as I'd like to take 100% of the credit for that, I am utilizing one of the intelligent features of the drone. All the pilots at our station, we fly with DJI Phantom 4 Pros, and they have an intelligent feature that they call active track. Basically, it allows it to lock onto an object. It could be a person, it could be a car, it could be a boat, it could be a bicycle. It really, frankly, could be anything, but those are some of the ones that it does the best job with. And it locks onto it, and then as it moves, it follows it. It's actively tracking it. Now, I still have some control. I'm still controlling in some of the other videos that I'm going to show you. I'll kind of show you how I'm still sort of controlling the drone so that that I have control over how the shot is ultimately framed. But those intelligent flight functions really do a lot of the heavy lifting. Now, I've done some video on a boat before I realized that flight feature was a thing. So I'm going to do something today that I really don't typically do, which is show you some of my raw video that honestly is not so great, that does not utilize that technology because quite frankly, I didn't know about it. I didn't know how to use it at that point. But it's me trying to do essentially the same thing, which is follow a boat, this time in the harbor down in Santa Barbara. So let's go ahead and roll that video and just kind of watch for a second. I think I can talk over this because there's no background audio. So this was for a story that I was doing about the principle of the coast and the beach and everyone in the general public having access to it. And it was in the context of a beach that, because it was surrounded by private property, had essentially become sort of a private beach for very, very, very wealthy homeowners in that area. And the Coastal Commission had been fighting this legal battle with the homeowners to give the public access to the beach for a long time, unsuccessfully. And then finally they said, well, if you can take a boat or a kayak out there, then you can use the beach. And so we actually kayaked out to the beach to demonstrate why that just really was a ridiculous and unworkable way of going about this. But you can see I'm trying to kind of center that boat up. I'm trying to follow it. You know, it starts and it stops. It's not smooth. It's what I call herky-jerky, you know. And so ultimately, you know, you can do it, but it's just challenging. It's just not as smooth. You might as well, if they've come up with a technology that helps you do it, you might as well utilize that, and the results that you get will be much, much better. So let's go ahead. Let's roll the next. So this is video from that same story. This is kind of once I had figured out about this feature. Some of it was done with active track. I think I'm actually doing this manually here, which is pretty good. Give myself credit for that. But you know, these intelligent flight, you know, functions really can make what you're doing much more professional, just super smooth. So, you know, utilize those kind of as much as you can. All right, that's what I think I got there. I got one more. I think I got one more. So the first ones were all on the water, but obviously you can use this to track things that are on land as well. So I think we've got a video. Yeah, this was from a story that I did just in the past year. It was a story about the Central Valley and the Central Valley's bullfighting and bull grabbing tradition, and about how there was a family and a family farm that was really sort of central to that tradition. This is same flight. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually pulling the drone back. It had closed in a little too tightly to that tractor. As I pull it back, what it forces it to do is kind of tilt the camera up so that I see a little bit more of the horizon and the surrounding area. So, you know, it's kind of a combination of things. You're both allowing this amazing technology to do what it does, which is follow it, but you kind of have to understand how all these things work together. And so you still can retain some control. You can move the drone backwards or move it forwards a little bit. It will adjust the camera naturally to kind of keep that object in the center of frame. And so it's kind of a combination of it's doing its thing, and I know how it's going to react to something that I do. And so there's kind of an interplay between both of those things. All right.
So I think we have a taker for one of your hats here. Susan Bradley asks, have you ever lost a drone?
Yes, I have. I've lost. Okay. Definition of lost. I mean, like never got it back. No. Crashed it to the point where it was then inoperable. Yes. Sadly, I think you learn some things from when you lose it, from when you crash it. I'll tell you a story really quickly. The time or the flight that essentially destroyed my drone. I was shooting a reservoir in the South Bay. I had started at the base of the reservoir. It wasn't a big reservoir. And I was trying to basically have it ascend, just kind of climb up, from the outside of the dam to reveal the reservoir. Well, in that area, there were nesting geese. And I've had birds, in particular seagulls in Santa Cruz, attack and chase the drone, but they just sort of harass it. They've never, fingers crossed, knock on wood, they've never actually made contact with it. The geese, they were not so restrained. So I'm flying it up, trying to rise it above this reservoir. Maybe I got a little too close, maybe to nests. It's probably my guess. It's probably a maternal or parental instinct that kicked in. Well, I'm watching I'm not even really watching the drone. I'm watching the monitor in my controller, and I see the goose. I see its beak coming straight at the drone, and it knocks it out of the air. It didn't fall far, but it fell on its back like a turtle on the back of its shell in some shallow water. Water and electronics don't really mix. That was enough to basically kind of damage some of the equipment. It would fly later, but I don't think the camera ever really worked the same. I was able to retrieve it, so I didn't lose it, but that definitely damaged it. So one of our fellow drone pilots, Kito, early on, probably within the first year of when we launched the program, he was flying down in Big Sur. He was flying at a bridge that had been washed out in the torrential rains, I think, that we got in 2017. The weather conditions changed on him very quickly, and he was caught in a downpour. And in his haste to get the drone back to himself, he didn't realize that there were some tree limbs above him. So he tried to shoot it up and bring it back. He clipped those tree limbs, and then it fell into the chasm that had been created by this mudslide. So yeah, you're gonna lose it. You try your best not to, but it's something that's definitely going to happen.
I love the Angry Bird story. And on that subject, Hunter Rand asks, have you encountered angry bystanders, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, I would say that drones are something where people either love them and are really curious about them, like, hey, that's really cool. Can I see what what you're seeing? Conversely, there's the other half of the population, feels like they're an annoyance, or feels like they are intrusive or invasive in some way. So the buzzing, I think bothers some people. And so I think you have to be sensitive to that. I think if you explain to them that you're for a TV station, at least in my instance, that I'm there for a TV station and that I'm, gathering video for a story that I'm working on, sometimes that explanation is enough to kind of, smooth out somebody's frustration. There's also generally kind of a misunderstanding of airspace and where you're allowed to fly. In that story that I told you about earlier, that was about global warming and rising sea levels, I was getting some video of homes that were right there along the coast. And there was one homeowner that was really, really angry and felt like I didn't have the right to fly there. And I tried to basically explain to him that property rights were different than airspace, and that I could fly in an area that was close to his home, that was not actually a violation. I think that person threatened to call the police on me. I think you just have to maintain your calm. I kind of calmly told him, I said, look, I'm trying to sort of explain to you the rules, the actual law. It's probably what you're going to hear from the police if you call them and they come out here. I can't control that. If that's what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do. I'm trying to, sort of find the balance. And honestly, I had stopped the drone over the sidewalk. So I never actually, even though I could, I didn't cross over into his property just because, people not necessarily understanding what my rights and their rights are doesn't mean that it's not going to kind of upset them. So you kind of have to just be cool, be calm, try to educate them if they're willing to listen to you, and just understand too that especially like in a place of scenic beauty, like the coast, like the ocean, that people might be annoyed that you're buzzing the drone around there. So, you have to be sensitive to that as well and sort of find that balance.
Hey, well, I want to thank Susan and Hunter for their questions. And there's still time to ask some questions, and we have one hat left. But I'd like to get on to our last two topics before we end here. So one of the things I've been most impressed with is the creativity of your work, and it's an evolution. It feels like you're continually looking for new and unexpected applications of drone videography.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you don't want to repeat yourself. If you think of yourself kind of as a storyteller and an artist, you don't want to just, do the same thing that you've done before. And so you want to use the drone and whatever other, cameras and videography equipment that you're using in service of the story itself. And one of the things that I've really kind of prided myself on, that's become a little bit of a signature in some of my in-depth feature storytelling, is the use of not only the drone in a unique and creative way, but multiple other cameras sort of simultaneously that I then have, a lot of material to use to combine in editing. So I'm going to show you a video here in just a second. I'll set it up first. It's a story that I did a few years ago before the pandemic. It was about a Mexican folkloric dance troupe in San Jose. And kind of the twist to the story was that most of the members of this dance troupe were from the LGBTQ community. And in the performance of their routines, they would bend and sometimes just kind of throw out the traditional gender roles that you would sort of expect in something like this. Sometimes the men would dance the women's parts and vice versa. They would swap costumes. I mean, it was really kind of visual and interesting and colorful. And this is from the opening segment to that story.
The traditional male's role is very macho. And the women portray exactly the opposite, a very submissive role. There are very, very few strong roles.
Yeah, what I love about that story is that, I mean, it was an interesting story just on its own merits, but folkloric dance is very, very visual. You could see that the costumes that are worn there are really, 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 really colorful. That was shot in the courtyard of the Mexican Heritage Plaza down in San Jose. And it was shot basically on around noon, I believe is generally when it was shot. Now, typically that's not really a great time actually for anyone that does either still photography or videography. Shooting something in the noon sun is not really a great time because the sun is almost directly overhead. It shines straight down. It kind of creates unflattering light and shadows on people's faces. But I knew that one of the things that I wanted to do was kind of send the drone up probably about 40 or 50 feet above the dancers and then shoot straight down. And it almost becomes abstracted in some ways. You know, you get this sort of swirling of the woman's costume. I think it's really kind of super cool. One other thing that I kind of want to emphasize there, and it's something that I've mentioned before, the drone was just one of multiple cameras. There was my regular camera from the station. It was on a slider that moved it laterally right and left. Actually operated, shout out to my niece who came with me that day, and she was the one that actually set that up and operated the camera on the slider. There was a handheld gimbal that I followed the dancers around, and there was also another secondary camera that got that low angle shot that showed the building. And so, once again, the drone is a tool. And it's one of just many tools in the toolbox. And so you can use it and incorporate it with other sources of video in a way that becomes really sort of rich, where you've got multiple cameras rolling at the same time. And it all kind of sort of is pieced together, like a jigsaw puzzle in a way that I think can be really, really effective. I think we've got another video. It's similar in nature. Let's not roll it just yet. I'll set it up. It's for a story that I did this past year. It was about San Francisco's Chinatown, some of the struggles that they encountered during the pandemic. It also delved into the culture of Chinatown, as well as kind of as we were emerging from the worst of the pandemic, sort of some signs of hope. And so let's go ahead and roll that. And I think this sound is full, so I'll just
tradition, every lion costume has a mirror embedded in the forehead. According to legend, the monster was ultimately defeated when it saw its own reflection and was scared off.
Yeah, so that was two dance sequences. One that was at the very beginning of the story, one that came in the latter part of that story, very close to the end. And just, like in the folkloric dance sequence, it's the drone used in a couple of kind of different ways. It's a GoPro. It's, once again, a camera on a slider. It's a jib. It was a couple of GoPros on monopods. I mean, there was an insane amount of camera equipment. There was all sort of recording that same action to get the different angles so that I could put it all together in the editing of the story.
So I want to get to another question here, and again, it's from Susan Bradley, who is a fledgling drone pilot. She has a drone of her own, and she asks, do you have suggestions for beginners?
Yeah. So when I told you at the outset that I had been flying for 6+ years and then about 5.5 for the station, so I bought, along with my friend and fellow drone pilot Kit Doe, we bought a drone together for Christmas of 2016. We had very indulgent wives who let that be our joint Christmas gift to each other. We didn't actually start flying for the station for another year because it took some time to get licensed. It took some time for the station's program to kind of get up and running. And I really think that kind of the magic and the practical value of that was that for a whole year, we were flying a drone, but we weren't doing it for the purpose of putting something on television. And what that allowed me to do was really sort of master how to fly, right? I mean, like the first thing that you want to do is you just want to master how to fly in terms of, okay, I know how to launch it. If I want to send it forward, I know how to send it that way. If I want to bring it back, I can do that. If I want to go forward and make it curve to the left, I can do that. I can send it up. I can send it down. I can do all of those things reliably and comfortably. Because when you're first learning, it's when you're a little too close to a building or to a tree or to some other object and you need to get it away from that thing. That's when you're going to send it this way and then you need to send it that way. And now you've sent it into the tree limbs and now you're panicking. So the first thing I would say, if your ultimate goal is the creation of videos, and that's my ultimate goal, that's, I don't generally just fly for my own pleasure anymore. I fly to create videos. But the first thing that you have to do is just learn how to fly it, And then what I would say is, like I said, kind of once you're thinking about using it to create videos, then you begin to look at, okay, what are the lighting conditions? I personally, you can leave it set on auto and then it sort of picks everything for you. It adjusts the color temperature and the exposure and, all of these other things. I do everything in manual so that I've got control over how that picture looks. I think that's an important thing. And then you sort of want to just kind of think of, what am I trying to convey with this shot? What's the message? How do I want to frame it? How do I want to move the drone? Do I want to get close to a building and pull back? Do I want to start further away and push in? Do I want to set some meaningful object in the foreground and then kind of push in, to that and beyond it? And so all of those things, first, you got to learn how to fly. Then you're sort of thinking about the creation of videos and how you use your ability now to fly to create interesting videos. Make sense?
Yeah, so thanks for that. That was very complete. I have another question here. We're really going to change directions a little bit, but Jorge Bustos is commenting on what are the trespassing laws in California where drones are concerned.
So without getting too much into the legality of things, I want to just sort of explain one thing. Drones fly in the national airspace. And in reality, the only people that truly have the authority to regulate the flights of drones where you can and cannot fly is the FAA. A lot of cities and states and others have implemented different rules about drones, and they're of sort of questionable legality. They can, as far as we operate here at Channel 5, these state agencies or cities or municipalities can perhaps tell us where we can launch and take off from. But once we're in the national airspace, if the FAA, if the feds say it's okay to fly somewhere, then generally you can. But if you don't want to get, and run afoul of any laws, then go ahead and familiarize yourself with whatever the sort of the local ordinances or the state ordinances are. I think that there were perhaps some legislation in terms of that kind of govern, essentially paparazzi, people that might fly drones into the backyard of the Kardashians' house or something like that. Familiarize yourself with that. I'm not an expert because that's quite frankly not how I use it. And so I'm rarely, if ever, going to run afoul of something like that. But yeah, it always makes sense to, wherever you are flying, to familiarize yourself with the local state or city or county rules.
Well, thanks for your question, Jorge. And we'd like to move on to our final topic. We've been in the great outdoors so far. So what's it like flying drones indoors?
Tricky. But no, I think the thing is that, like I told you before, that I'm always looking for new and creative ways to use it, right? Like I don't think that people typically think of a dance troupe or, lion dancers as an application for a drone so much as you might think of, some kind of scenic hillside somewhere. But you can fly it indoors. You can fly, like we said earlier, you can fly it low to the ground. You don't have to be 300 feet up, and you can also fly it indoors. Now, a couple of caveats. When you're flying outside, usually the drone is locked onto GPS satellites. And that's in some ways how it orients itself and allows it to kind of not drift off, fly with some precision. Generally speaking, inside of a building, the building is going to block the drone's ability to lock onto those GPS satellites. So you're going to basically have to pilot it yourself. One of the things, and I will, before we roll the video, there's another intelligent flight feature that's called tripod mode. It's really not that much to it. It just kind of throttles the drone. It slows it down. And I think indoors, the recommendation has always been to fly it in tripod mode if you're using, like we do, a DJI, because it slows it down. And it means that there's less of a hazard of you're going to make a sudden movement and it's going to speed off, to the right or to the left and crash into something. Let me set up this next video. Is for a story that I did in the earliest days of the pandemic. It was essentially about a church community that was shuttered and suddenly had to find a way to connect to parishioners when they couldn't come to the church in person. It was shot at a church in San Jose, Five Wounds Church, which I think arguably or inarguably is one of the most beautiful churches in the South Bay. The architecture is amazing. The building on the inside is amazing. And so I'm filming this ministry team, the pastor and a couple of, his helpers. And because they sort of had to basically kind of become like their own little studio setup, even though they didn't really have those technical skills before the pandemic. And I'm thinking to myself, in this really beautiful kind of cavernous, empty church, man, it would be amazing to fly in here. There's no way that they're going to let me fly in here. This is an historic church. It's on the registry of historic buildings. Well, I thought, doesn't hurt to ask. And they were super accommodating. They're like, okay, you want to fly in here? Go ahead. Fine. So after the mass, for a couple of times, I would just fly inside the church. And I think the results are pretty cool. Let's go ahead and roll that video.
The fabric of faith has been similarly tested, strained by the need to separate and the desire to connect. Its fiber has proven surprisingly pliable. Like many places of worship, the daily Mass at Five Wounds has provided comfort to a virtual community of believers, far beyond the welcoming walls of this largely empty church.
All right, let's go ahead and keep playing this video, but there's no real sound after this, so I can go ahead and talk over it. I think one of the things that was really neat about flying inside of that church was it gives you kind of a perspective that would be almost impossible to capture in any other way. And the once again, kind of the gimbal, which stabilizes the camera, it does a lot of the heavy lifting. The video, wouldn't you agree, Steve, is very smooth. I showed that story to a photographer friend of mine back in Atlanta where I used to work. And he was saying, I watched it the first time before it occurred to me that you were flying inside the building. Because I was like, there's no way he's flying inside the building. But ultimately, it allowed you to get some really, really cool shots that you would have to have a lot of sophisticated and expensive equipment to somehow capture otherwise. It's once again, it's kind of an example of trying to sort of push the envelope, trying to come up with new and innovative ways to use this thing. That's really, for me, one of the rare times that I've been able to fly inside of a building. It was the right story and the right application for it. I probably wouldn't suggest you fly in something that's, smaller. That's a really big church that seats probably 500 or 600 people in total. And so it was really perfect. Now, the first couple of times I did it, I will be honest, I was like, they're trusting me. I can't crash in here. You know, like that will be an expensive mistake in terms of dollars and in terms of, you know, kind of compromising their trust and my competence as a pilot.
Well, we're getting really close to the end of our time, and thank you really much. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us everything that you've learned over the last few years of being a drone pilot. Do you have any final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're going to fly for a business, if you're flying for any kind of commercial purpose, you have to get licensed. That's just the rules. And, you know, so go ahead and go through that process. And then once you are licensed, go ahead and kind of color inside the lines. You know, don't do things that are reckless. Don't do things where you're going to risk crashing or just doing something really sort of irresponsible. Collectively, as a community of drone pilots, we're all sort of bound together, you know, almost kind of by this code of ethics and just by the practicality of not doing something stupid. Because people that do something stupid, like crash a drone into a football stadium or crash a drone into the White House or something like that, what happens is that this emerging industry is going to become more and more regulated to sort of try and regulate out that kind of stupidity. But what happens is it becomes a little heavy-handed, and so sometimes, you know, people that do stupid things just kind of invite, unfortunately, more and more regulation of the industry. Like I mentioned before, to the question about what's your kind of advice for beginners, which is just practice. Find a place. Usually in almost any community, there's going to be a park, an airfield that's generally known to be the place where people go to fly drones. You know, it's usually some big open space, fewer things to crash into, and just practice. Just practice until you feel comfortable making the drone do what you want to do. I remember how nervous I was the first time I put it over water. I was like, oh my God. because if you make a mistake, it's gonna sink like a rock to the bottom of whatever body of water you're putting it over. So just spend some time practicing. And then, you know, third, once you begin to sort of move from just learning how to pilot the drone itself to making videos, that's sort of when you become a student of the quality of light, the direction of light. How am I going to frame this? What kind of movement am I going to make creatively to make the most effective video? And then fourth, I would say just embrace that spirit of experimentation. Try different things. You know, I mean, that's sort of the through line with what I was trying to, you know, what I've tried to show you today and how I've evolved as a pilot over time, which is at each step, I've tried to sort of figure out what's the way to create the best videos possible, the most, you know, sort of eye-popping, interesting, informative videos. And then how can I continue to evolve? All right, I've flown at high altitudes. Well, let's bring it low and see what that perspective is. Let's master some of those intelligent flight modes. So you get those, you know, crazy shots of tracking the boat. I mean, how hard would that be to get, you know, in a traditional TV sense? You'd have to convince the station to spend thousands of dollars to get the helicopter to do it, and it might not even do it as well. And then, you know, just kind of keep pushing the limits, keep finding creative uses for it. You know, that includes flying indoors if there's the right story and the right application, and just have fun, right? Share what you've learned. That's kind of why I was so excited to be invited to do this today, is because, you know, it gave me an opportunity to curate, to go back and look through 5 and 6 years worth of videos that I've created, which is a really cool process. And it, you know, kind of reminded me of how I've evolved as a pilot over time. But experiment and then share that creativity with others that are in this kind of same community, and bounce ideas off each other and sort of collectively build, you know, those examples of creativity that sort of push the whole enterprise forward.
Well, thanks, Devin. I've been sitting here for the last hour. I have one last question, and looking at that splint on your thumb and wondering if that's drone related at all.
No, it's not. Sadly, it's a kitchen mishap the other day. I don't know if you know what a mandolin is, used to
Oh yeah.
slice.
Yep.
In a moment of distraction, I sliced my finger pretty good just 2 days ago. So, yeah, it is a challenge. I'm not going to unbandage it for another day and rebandage it, but it was a pretty nasty cut, and it bled. It bled for the better part of an hour, despite my efforts to stop the bleeding. So, no, not drone related. Not a flock of geese that thought I got a little too close to their nests. And
You can still fly a drone with that injury.
well, it is the thumb. I mean, probably, but gingerly, I would say.
So I do want to put up your contact information here. So any questions for Devin about drones, drone related?
And Steve, one clarification, that will not make it to me. So it is dfeely@viacomcbs.com.
Oh, okay. I got that wrong. Okay. We will take it down.
Yeah, we migrated to it.
But this one I know is right. If you have any questions, I can get them to Devin if you can't, if your email doesn't make it to him. But also, we're also looking for future topics of what works. And any of the programs we've been doing, I will accept suggestions over any kinds of programs that anybody is interested in. And with that, Devin, I want to thank you. I want to thank for all those members who, viewers that watch this. This will be available on our website after today. So you'll be able to tune in and ask questions of me, ask questions of Devin if you have questions after this broadcast. So thank you. And I also want to thank Randy Forsman, who's been behind the scenes directing this program, had a lot of pieces and a lot of playback to it. So I thank Randy. And of course, I thank Devin. And we'll see you next time on What Works.